Hello and welcome back to our news update, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. Allies in the coalition of the willing are meeting in London on Friday, where British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to call for the strongest possible support for Ukraine. His proposals include removing Russian oil and gas from global markets, using frozen Russian assets to aid Kyiv, and supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports.
Number 10 Downing Street has come out with an ambitious laundry list of demands they want to see concluding the coalition of the willing meeting in the British capital on Friday. 33 allies from the group, which aim to give Ukraine security guarantees if a ceasefire is brokered with Russia, will either dial in online or attend in person. The aim of the meeting, according to the Office of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, is to give Ukraine long-range weapons, mobilise Russian frozen state assets, as well as taking Russian gas and oil off the global market. Now, some of these things are looking feasible. We know the US came out with its first sanctions against Russia on Thursday, targeting two major oil producers comprising 5% of the global market. The EU also approved the 19th sanctions package against Russia, effectively banning the imports of Russian LNG into the EU by 2027. But the matter of the long-range missiles, as well as moving on those frozen Russian state assets, look unclear. This is because a major EU summit on Thursday failed to galvanise enough support to give Ukraine the €140 billion reparations loan, using those frozen Russian state assets, giving the cash balances to Ukraine in the form of this loan. We know that the Belgian Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, was the most vocal antagonist against the plan. He claimed that he did not receive the requisite clarification from the European Commission to give this proposal the green light on Thursday, or the guarantees from his allies, comprising the 27 EU heads of states, that if Russia wants the money back once the war ends, they will chip in with the pot of cash. But when it comes to the reparations loan, those EU leaders did agree on Thursday to revisit the matter in December. We're hoping that this coalition of the willing meeting on Friday in London will come out with some more concrete outcomes for Ukraine that will aim to stop the bloodshed. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
I think this was an excellent move by President Trump, said Finnish President Alexander Stubb in response to the new US sanctions on Russian oil. Stubb explained that since Russia only understands power, he welcomes the move and more pressure on Moscow is needed.
I think this was an excellent move by President Trump. His negotiating method is somewhere between a carrot and a stick, and this is clearly a stick. He probably felt that President Putin promised him a ceasefire at the line of contact. That is what President Trump set out. And when that didn't happen, he decided it is time to put sanctions. And I agree with him. The only thing that Russia understands is power. We need to put more pressure on them, and we can do that through sanctions. And that's why I think President Trump's actions are great news.
A Liberian-flagged bulk carrier has been detained by the Swedish Coast Guards on suspicion of dumping waste into the Baltic Sea. Sweden's defense minister said the incident highlights active maritime surveillance by local authorities. The vessel was first spotted by a Swedish patrol a few days ago near Faroe Island off the country's southeastern coast. A crew member was caught while dumping trash into the Baltic Sea waters, believed to be household, local media reported. The ship was boarded by Swedish authorities after docking in the port of Göteborg. Sweden's defense minister, Carl-Oskar Bolin, said in a post on X the incident showcases how the Coast Guard actively conducts maritime surveillance in an effort to combat environmental crimes. Fuel and heating costs may not rise significantly in 2027. Leaders of European states directed the European Commission to rethink the ETS2, basically an emissions tax that was supposed to go into force that year. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called this a win for Polish diplomacy. ETS2 is an extension of the original ETS, which covered emissions from power stations and heavy industry. Now it's supposed to include emissions from transport and housing. Poland has been leading the effort to postpone or scrap the system entirely, as it will raise costs of living in the country, where 1/3 of households still uses fossil fuels for heating. The European Commission now has to redo the system in a way suggested by the European leaders. Options on the table include postponement, gradual imposition of the levy, and stronger consumer protections. Two Russian military aircraft, an Su-30 fighter and Il-78 refueling tanker, briefly entered Lithuania's airspace on Thursday. The airspace's violation was condemned by the country's president, Gitanas Nausėda.
Strongly condemn the violation of Lithuanian airspace recently by the fighter jet and transport vehicle, transport plane of Russian Federation from Kaliningrad region side. This is cruel violation of international law and territorial sovereignty of Lithuania, and we have to react to this.
The Greek police have presented new information in the case of misappropriating European Union funds. 37 people have been arrested in connection with the investigation. The police have clarified that the scheme to misappropriate European Union funds has a structured hierarchy. Organized crime groups were able to obtain EU agricultural subsidies through forged documents. It is estimated that both the EU and Greek government lost millions of euros as a result. The misappropriated money was later used to buy real estate and luxury goods. Shots were fired and a tent was set ablaze when two men fought near the Serbian parliamentary building in Belgrade on Thursday. The incident sparked controversy as President Alexander Vučić called it a terrorist act prompted by anti-government protests that have been raging since the Novi Sad disaster last November. Ivanka Popovic, former rector and pro-glass activist, told TVP World the men responsible are affiliated with a parliamentary group linked with President Vučić.
This area across from the parliament of Serbia has been taken over by Mr. Vučić's followers, where it's sort of a paramilitary camp. We had an incident in this encampment where two older men, one 67, one 70 years old, had actually an altercation which ended with a shooting where one man was wounded and there was a gas bomb or a gas container that was hit, which caused the fire in this encampment. And this in itself was an incident, I think, waiting to happen in this illegal settlement. But what the worst aspect of this is that President Vučić immediately blamed the protesters for being responsible for this and labeling it a terrorist act. And once again, we see the president usurping his position. His rule is possibly coming to an end, that he is now ready to use all means to regain or to retain his power and his positions.
North Korea has begun construction work on a memorial for its soldiers killed in Russia's war in Ukraine. A groundbreaking ceremony was held on Friday, the Korean Central News Agency has said. During the ceremony, Kim Jong-un said the ties between Russia and North Korea are at a, quote, historic peak, adding that they will continue developing. According to Pyongyang's leader, the memorial will feature sculptures of the soldiers that died while fighting for Russia, as well as photos and artwork depicting the fighting itself. In April, Ukrainian authorities estimated that North Korea had deployed more than 14,000 troops to support Russia in waging its war of terror in Ukraine. In Georgia, there has reportedly been a significant rise in the number of anti-government protesters being arrested following a change in the law.
Local media report that demonstrators on Thursday night staged a roadblock outside the Parliament building in Tbilisi to highlight the law change that was introduced last week. The new rules replace fines with imprisonment for protest-related offences, including road blocking and face covering. Protesters charged with such offences can face up to 15 days in prison for a first-time offence, with repeat offenders facing up to 2 years. Demonstrators say there's been a surge in detentions as police hunt people to arrest. Protesters have been blocking the road in front of the Georgian parliament every day since last December, when the government announced it was halting talks about joining the European Union.
This Friday marks 50 years since Iceland's first women's strike. On October 24, 1975, Icelandic women took to the streets to protest wage discrepancies and demonstrate just how vital their input into Iceland's economy and society was. On its anniversary this year, Icelandic women have called for another strike over the same issues. The protest was also known as the Women's Day Off. Those who participated in the protest did not go to their paid jobs, but they also did not perform any housework or childcare for the whole day. Aiming to bring attention to unfair employment practices, some 90% of Iceland's female population took part in the strike. The following year, Iceland's government passed a law aiming to equalize men's and women's rights. But 50 years on, Icelandic women have called for another strike, citing increased violence, a growing gender pay gap and inequality in home labor. As they say, the fight for equality is still far from over. Friday's march will see demonstrations and rallies all over Iceland, with thousands expected to participate. And with this, we conclude our news bulletin. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.